Tatsumaro is an official from the Japanese imperial court. He knocks on the door, thinking at this moment he would rather be juggling durians instead. A farmer opens the door. Tatsumaro takes a breath and informs him that the government is taking some of his land. A brief period of shock later, the farmer gets angry and starts a fight that he knows would just end in defeat. After a few minutes, the farmer breaks down and begs, "Please, I won't have enough fields. My children will starve." Tatsumaro looks at his feet and wishes he could sink into the ground where he would not have to talk to anyone, especially this poor farmer. But he puts on his official face and says, "I'm sorry, but this is the law." That night, Tatsumaro thinks about the countless other households he has yet to visit, and decides to end his life. Early Japan around the 500s was just a bunch of clans with their own chieftains, loosely connected to an uber chieftain who was the leader of the strongest clan, the Yamato. The chief of each clan mostly did as he pleased in his own lands. This laid-back system was puttering along pretty well until far to the west a threat appeared that made everyone spit out their miso soup through their noses. To deal with it, the Japanese started the most ambitious project they had ever undertaken up until that point. What was the threat? Across the sea, the Chinese were busy playing Who Wants to Be an Emperor for a few centuries until 581 when the Sui dynasty answered the final question and unified China. 37 years later came the Tang dynasty, even more powerful and influential. The Tang allied with a kingdom in the Korean peninsula called Shilla to flatten its neighbors into Korean pancakes. This was a problem for Japan. You see, they had diplomatic ties with those neighbors, especially Baekje. Japanese and Baekje noble families married each other, their peoples immigrated back and forth. During the wars in 663, Japan even sent a great navy to defend Baekje. At first, it seemed like the Tang Shilla invaders had the upper hand, but after 2 blood-soaked days, our Japanese and Baekje allies, through courage and perseverance, managed to get thoroughly wrecked, just utterly destroyed. And in 668, Shilla took over the entire peninsula. The Japanese saw the calligraphy on the wall and said, "Oh crap, we're next. We gotta do something." And they did. It was called Ritsuryō. Ritsu meant criminal code. Ryo meant administrative code. These were laws. Over a period of 100 years or so, Japanese leaders created laws to govern all of Japan. Historians call this new government the Ritsuryō state. Even before Shilla took over the Korean peninsula, Japan knew the might of a unified China. The Japanese admired the strength and culture of the Tang dynasty and also feared that the dragon would stretch its claws towards them. Reformers in the imperial court decided that if they wanted to avoid becoming dragon snack, they needed to build a strong, unified state like the Tang. They consulted some Japanese who had visited China and many refugees from the destroyed Korean kingdoms, a lot like how the Japanese in the Meiji period modernized when they saw the threat of the Western powers. The ruler of Japan was usually called Okimi, or Great King. The reformers decided they needed a rebranding and started using the word Tenno, meaning heavenly sovereign, or commonly translated as emperor. The new title leveled up the leader of Japan from being just a chieftain of the Yamato clan to a ruler with the authority of the gods. The reformers convinced clan chieftains to give up their lands to the new beefy government in return for positions in the court, then raised an army to knock over the fences that the rest of the clans were still sitting on. The claws of the new state grabbed Kyushu to the south and most of northern Honshu to the north, claiming most of the Japanese archipelago. Before, Japan's capital was as exciting as an empty DMV, just a sad group of a few government buildings. Japan itself had no city, just villages and hamlets. But in 694, they created a grand new capital called Fujiwara-kyo. It had a grid pattern, borrowed from the Tang capital of Chang'an. And in 710, they dropped a new capital, Heijo-kyo, or Nara, also inspired by Chang'an, although Heijo-kyo didn't have walls. But who needs walls when you're this fabulous? The new capital was a center of culture and trade. I'm going to split up the Ritsuryō system into a few main changes: new government bodies, a caste system, land and taxes, and crime and punishment. The new government had the emperor at the top, and below him were two main departments. The Jinggikan, or Department of Divinities, handled things related to Shinto kami worship. They appointed priests and came up with standards for worship rituals. The Daijokan, or the Great Department of State, handled things related to running the country, non-spiritual stuff. At the top of the Daijokan stood the Daijo Daijin, the chancellor or prime minister. He was right under the emperor and oversaw all state matters. This position was only filled when one hell of a candidate was found, so anyone who managed to grab the Daijo Daijin title was a great man indeed. Right under that was the Sadaijin, or the minister of the left. This position was always filled. He was the head of the Daijokan when there was no chancellor. His deputy was the Udaijin, or the minister of the right. Below that, the Naidaijin, or minister of the center. This dude was like a personal advisor to the emperor. Below them were a bunch of other officials, but we can't be here all day. All officials had a rank. It started out with over 30 ranks, but the number varied throughout the years. The higher your rank, the fatter your government paycheck. The Daijokan housed 8 ministries, each with a head and some other officials. The Ministry of Central Affairs handled matters closely related to the emperor. Civil Services enforced the administrative laws and managed government officials. The Ministry of Civil Administration handled ceremonies and foreign relations. Popular Affairs oversaw issues of the common people, like policing, taking census of the population, and maintaining land and tax records. The Ministry of War did war stuff. The Ministry of Justice held trials and punished criminals. The Treasury collected taxes and controlled the state's piggy bank. And the Ministry of the Imperial Household handled matters related to members of the imperial house. The new laws introduced a caste system of 2 types of citizens, Ryōmin and Senmin. Ryōmin was the upper class. It literally means good people. There were 5 types of good people. Senmin was the lower class. It literally means low people. It also has 5 types. Yep, the last 2 were slaves. Didn't know Japan had those, did ya? Kunuhi and Shinuhi were born into servitude and could be bought and sold by their owners, and they were not allowed to have official families. I assume they did have unofficial spouses and children, but this threat always hung over them. Their families could be torn apart if the owner decided to sell one of his slaves. The Ritsuryō caste system had some wiggle room. A kunuhi could become kanko at age 66 and actually freed at 76, so he could enjoy life as an unbound citizen for the rest. Oh, he's dead. A ryōmin who committed certain crimes could be demoted to senmin. At first, ryōmin and senmin could not marry, but they eventually allowed it. The children of these marriages became senmin, but that eventually changed too, and mixed children were born ryōmin. The new state gave a gift to each citizen. Each adult was given a plot of farmland. Adult male citizens got about 22 acres of land. Adult female citizens got 2/3 of that. Adult male servants or slaves got 1/3 of what the male citizens got. And adult female servants or slaves got 1/3 of what the female citizens got. After you died, your land returned to the state. Every 6 years, the government was supposed to conduct a census of the population and redistribute the lands. Very important for taxes. Households were taxed according to their land holdings. Now, this was very early on in Japan's history. You gotta give them massive props for being able to reallocate land across the country every 6 years. If it actually happened, but it didn't. It was way too much work and too little coffee. Eventually, they were like, on second thought, let's just reallocate lands for households where the headcount changed. So, households were incentivized to increase the number of members, or at least keep it the same. Oh no, honey, Uncle Kenji died. Well, don't just stand there, pop some pills and put a baby in me. We can't lose the eggplants. Also, most land reshufflings likely happened in the area around the capital and got less frequent the further out you went. Remember Tatsumaro from the story in the beginning? He was a real official tasked with reallocating land in a province. The job was high stress with long hours and longer arguments with people who were not too keen on losing their lands. Poor Tatsumaro did eventually choose to end his life. Besides paying taxes, people also had to pay with their bodies. Before the Ritsuryō state, armies were just small local groups who had a few weapons and a lot of enthusiasm. The new government drafted soldiers from every village, creating a large national army to fend off foreign invaders. The Ritsuryō state had 5 levels of punishment. Caning, which was 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 strikes on the butt. Public caning, which was 60, 70, 80, 90, or 100 butt attacks, with a cane a bit more girthy, done in public. Imprisonment, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, or 3 years in prison. Exile, where the criminal was forced to move away from the city. Depending on the crime, the exile location was either nearby, a bit further away, or very far away. And execution, by hanging or head cutting. There were 8 most despicable crimes that could not be pardoned, most resulting in execution. Killing the emperor, vandalizing the imperial palace or imperial tombs, treason, murder of a parent, grandparent, uncle, aunt, elder brother, and elder sister. For women, it also included killing of her husband or in-laws. Depravity. This included mass murder and casting curses. Not showing gratitude to parents. This included things like abusing them, filing a lawsuit against them, or sleeping with the concubine of a father or grandfather. You also had to properly mourn a parent or grandparent who died. It was a crime not to feel sad upon hearing about the death of a parent or grandparent, or to not cry over the remains and the coffin. You couldn't marry during the mourning period, nor could you play music for fun. The usual punishments for ingratitude towards parents were caning and imprisonment, but suing a parent, straight to execution. And lastly, murder of a superior, like a lord or a teacher. So with this brand new, strong, centralized government, how did they do against the foreign invaders that they were preparing for? Really, really well, because the invaders never existed. Instead of attacking Japan, the Tang dynasty decided to collapse instead. With the invasion threat shrinking to the size where you could lock it in a closet and forget about it, the people were finally able to sit back and start grumbling. Why did they need to pay all this tax or send their men to the national army? Soldiers kept deserting and farmers kept abandoning their fields. When Japan entered the Heian period, they shrugged at the China of their time and just began to fangirl over the culture of the Tang dynasty at its peak. The strong Japanese state gradually loosened its grip on the provinces. They disbanded the national army and gave the job of tax collection and security over to local officials. While the state was shrinking, Japan enjoyed a golden age of culture and gave rise to the samurai. What happened in this age? Click here to find out. We have some new patrons today: Saint Naive, Grugimi, Excellent Tone, Franziska Dixon, East Texas Piney Woods, and Cat HS. Thanks you guys. I love you and spread the knowledge.